I'm just going to mute myself. Okay, Matt?
No worries. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's the 7th of October today. Now, we were supposed to be starting at 11 o'clock, so I do apologise if you're going to miss this because we've had to start early due to unforeseen circumstances. But don't worry, we're recording it so you can watch it later. Now, I'm Matthew Long. I own my own clinic in Brace and Edmonds. So I call it the Mind and Body Clinic because I've found that you can't just treat the body, you can't just treat the mind separately, you need to treat people as a whole. Hence why I combine the two. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I did 22 years in the RAF Regiment. I left in October 2016. And I've already started my soft tissue therapy work before I left the RAF as part of my resettlement. Soft tissue therapy is basically advanced massage techniques, osteopathic techniques, medical acupuncture, maybe a bit of sports taping, and all that kind of stuff to help people physically. So you could call it like a bit like physiotherapy, but I don't have a degree. Okay, and it does seem to help people, and I learnt through going to see someone myself. A lot of people might know him, Dave Green, over in Thetford, and him helping me with my back trouble that I had at the time. A lot faster than I was getting help through the military and the physiotherapists. No disrespect to them, they're very busy people, and sometimes you just don't get enough treatment. So from learning from Dave Green the capabilities of the treatment, the potential of it, I looked into it when I did my resettlement and basically followed the same path as him through college at London and learnt advanced soft tissue therapy techniques that way. One thing I started to realize with soft tissue therapy work is a lot of my clients were coming in with neck and shoulder pain, and I would massage them, I'd acupuncture them, I would treat them, I'd click it and crack it, and they'd feel great afterwards, which was nice. But they'd come back 2-3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks later, and they were back to square one. Now, because they were back to square one, I was thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not fixing these people? Because a lot of the conditions I was getting, I was actually fixing people and getting some amazing results. But with these people, it just seemed to be like a vicious circle. So I started to delve into their lifestyle, but just asking general questions, not being too intrusive, and finding out that a lot of what their problem was stress. And from that, I started to try and look for ways I can help people with stress. Now, massage is great for relaxing and reducing stress, which is probably one of the reasons why they felt great when they left. But, they go back to work the next day or 2-3 days later or whatever, and all the stress would be back. So I had to find a way of helping people long-term rather than just a quick fix, which was only short-term. And coincidentally at the time, a local hypnotherapist got in touch with me about an introduction into hypnosis and and teaching a technique called kinetic shift, which you can do without hypnosis. So I didn't have to be a hypnotherapist to do it. Now, kinetic shift is great for removing negative emotions, basically. And we'll go on to more of that later. But I went on and did the introductory course, and then from that, I realized the power of hypnosis and hypnotherapy and went and did a hypnotherapy diploma with the UK Hypnosis Academy, of which I am one of their associated trainers. So that was great. Learning hypnotherapy and learning how to help people mentally as well as physically was a leap forward. And I changed from being Matlon massage to suddenly being Matlon mind and body, because I was treating the whole. And quite often I'm doing therapy work when I'm massaging people anyway, because they tell all. They get things off their chest, and I have to be able to listen and not necessarily give advice, but maybe just direct their thoughts into the direction they need to go in without actually influencing them directly. And I learned through the hypnotherapy that I could do this in a positive way and in an ethical way, which was what it was all about. So going on to stress. Stress can come in many shapes and forms. It can be part of post-traumatic stress. Of course, stress can be a stress on its own through maybe work, life, family, whatever. But it can also be stress from pain. It can also be stress from anxiety and pretty much anything. It could be just you have a stressful drive to work. Being able to learn to manage that so that you're not stressed, because stress can cause all sorts of problems, is key to being healthier mentally and physically. Now, stress quite often is part of the flight, flight, freeze response. I'm sure we've all heard of that. Now, when you go into a flight, flight, freeze response, your body starts to trigger a release of all sorts of hormones. One of the main ones that you know about is adrenaline, and another one, of course, is cortisol, not cortisone. Cortisone is an injection for pain relief quite often, or steroidal for anti-inflammatory, or combination of. But cortisol is a stress hormone that's naturally released in the body. And we've got a lovely chart here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. I should have done a screen share, but I didn't have it prepared in time. Now, as you can see by that peak in the morning, cortisol acts a bit like caffeine and wakes you up and gets you started, gets you up and running for the day. And as you go through the day, it slowly declines so that by late evening, you're ready to go to sleep. And then it starts to slowly increase to wake you up again in the morning. So I like to compare it to caffeine. It's naturally produced in the body. We need it. We need it. Now, but what happens when you get stressed all the time is that your cortisol levels stay elevated and it starts to disrupt your sleep pattern. It then has a vicious effect, a vicious cycle effect of being run down, being tired, being exhausted, which stresses you out, may even cause pain. And then, of course, you go back to sleep at night and you're tired. And you wake up and you're tired, because one of the things that cortisol does if it's elevated during your sleep cycle is it stops you hitting your REM sleep, that sleep where your brain does all its repair work, a bit like decluttering your hard drive, clearing it all out, ready to start the next day. So we need to be able to get into proper sleep pattern, and cortisol will prevent you from doing that. Now, long-term effects of stress can be really detrimental to you both physically and mentally. And it has all sorts of effects on the brain. Now, one of the things that cortisol will do over a long period of time is it will create something called a free radical, which is basically an oxygen cell, which runs riot in your body. And this will then attack your brain, a bit like the way oxygen attacks metal when it's wet. It will start rusting away, and it actually attacks your brain cells. And when it attacks your brain cells, it actually gets hold of one of your brain cells, attaches itself, and it basically causes your brain cell to erupt, to explode like a little mini explosion, causes it to rupture. And although we don't feel it, it's not a physical sensation. It can cause things like short-term memory loss. It can cause things like not being able to concentrate, not being able to function as well as you'd normally like to, and not being able to focus on a particular task. You start getting distracted, your brain starts drifting away onto other tasks, and then you never really finish the task you're on. So it can have quite a detrimental effect physically. And one of the first signs of stress is that short-term memory loss and being, the lack of focus and lack of concentration. And it's something certainly that the medical profession look for when they're looking for signs of stress. So it then becomes a vicious cycle. You're tired all the time, you're fatigued, you're not sleeping properly, your brain cells are getting attacked. Don't worry, it's not going to be a long-term thing. It can be reversed. But you do need to address the situation with your stress. Now, this attacks this whole stress thing is part of your fear, part of your brain, part of your flight, flight, freeze. So if you imagine yourself being on edge all the time, and this is one of the main things that you start seeing with PTSD, that hypervigilance, constantly being alert. It's tiring, it's exhausting. And again, you're going to have that vicious cycle of not being able to rest, not being able to sleep. And, it is a vicious cycle. So we do need to do all we can to keep our anxiety, our stress, and keeping cortisol down to a minimum to be able to function correctly, to function efficiently and function well in our jobs and in our lives. So just going to mute someone. There we go. Someone just joining the party. So it is something that we do need to think about, how we can keep our stress at a manageable level. Now, we talked about how it can affect us mentally. We talked about sleep cycles and other things, and there's lots you can do to help yourself. One of the top tips I give my clients for a start is meditation and listening to nice chilled out music. I personally like to listen to brainwave music at night. If I'm struggling to sleep, I'll stick my headphones on. It's best with headphones. Or even in a morning or afternoon where I've got a bit of free time, I'll listen to some brainwave music. Now, brainwave music, you can find loads of free stuff on Amazon Music and YouTube. And it's some people might know it as delta wave music, but it's not just delta waves. There's beta waves and alpha waves as well. And it just has a low vibration that syncs your brain to being in a happy state or a relaxed state, depending on what kind of music you listen to and what kind of delta waves. It's all about the frequency that your brain needs to be in that good state. And the music matches that frequency. You listening to the music, your brain will then match the frequency as well, which is a nice, easy way to really chill out. And quite often I'll find that if I just listen to it 10, 15 minutes in the morning or afternoon, it's almost like getting a 20 minutes of REM sleep or something. I feel so refreshed afterwards, and you don't have to completely fall asleep for it. It's almost like being in self-hypnosis, which is quite often what I use it for as well, if there's things that I want to achieve in my own life. One of the things we found with stress as well is that it does affect us physically. Now, I don't know if you've heard of a condition like fibromyalgia, which is directly linked to stress, in my opinion. And it usually comes from people who work too hard to, they're the kind of people who can't say no. They're the kind of people who just can't stop. They, workaholics, whatever you want to call them. But even when they get home, they don't switch off. They're having to do stuff around the house, and they just never switch off and never stop. And that will keep your cortisol levels raised as well. Now, cortisol, we've mentioned how it affects the brain. But physically, after a long period of time, cortisol will start attacking the nerve endings of the body. And we're going to all the chemical reactions that happen, but it starts attacking the ends of the nerves, and the nerves start sending signals to the brain that something's wrong. Now, normally if you feel pain or you feel a sensation, the nerve will send that information to the brain, and the brain will interpret it correctly. They'll interpret it as pain, heat, sensation, whether it be good or bad sensation. And the brain will respond accordingly, and you may react accordingly. If you put your hand on something hot and it feels too hot, you'll suddenly pull away, and you do that without thinking. It happens automatically, and your brain triggers that response straight away. But when it comes to cortisol in the body attacking the nerves, it sends a signal to the brain, and the brain doesn't know what it is. It's a signal that it doesn't understand. So when it gets the signal that it doesn't understand, it just triggers the response for pain, because it doesn't know what it is and it thinks it might be bad, and better to err on the side of caution. Let's say it's pain, and that way we'll move away from it. But when it's attacking from the inside of the body, you can't move away. So therefore, the brain will just send you signals of pain, and you're feeling pain that doesn't exist. And one of the things that doctors have a bad example of doing is they tell people, well, it's all in your head. Well, of course it's all in your head, because the brain is the only thing that tells you there's pain. But for the person who's feeling that pain is very, very real. So you need to, again, find ways of reducing your cortisol, reduce that stress hormone, so that your body will stop sending signals of pain, and you will then reduce the pain. And that pain cycle, whether it be from fibromyalgia or any other kind of pain condition, again has a vicious cycle of raising cortisol levels because you're in pain, because you're stressed because of the pain. And then the stress hormones will start attacking the body, telling you there's even more pain. And one thing we found, and if you ever watched the doctors on BBC when they've done, I forgot his name now, when he's talked about pain, and the more painkillers you take, after about 4 or 5 weeks, they become ineffective. So you have to take more painkillers. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, they become ineffective. So you take more painkillers. And months down the line, you'll be on the maximum dose of painkillers, but you'll still be receiving the same amount of pain as you did on day one before you started taking painkillers. And, trying to wean yourself off those painkillers then is very, very difficult. But one thing that I've found with hypnosis, meditation, relaxation is that instantly we can reduce the pain during that period of time when you're in that state of relaxation. And it can be using hypnotherapy. I've actually eliminated people's unnecessary pain. Now, I say unnecessary pain because some pain is necessary and we need to feel it. Like for me, I have arthritis in my knee. And if I would tell myself and hypnotize myself or get someone else to hypnotize me to eliminate the pain so I don't feel it anymore, then I'll start running around doing too much and I'll be causing more damage to my knee. So I need that pain to remind me not to overdo it. But with something like fibromyalgia, where the pain is completely unnecessary, then we can eliminate the pain completely and tell the brain to stop sending those signals. But there's still a reason behind why you have fibromyalgia, and it's quite often stress, and you need to listen to your body, and you need to do things to compromise with your brain to reduce that stress so your brain isn't going to be telling you that there's pain. One of the things we find with these chronic stress, chronic pain conditions is that it quite often increases the worry and anxiety and the fears that you have on a daily basis. We quite often get angry and frustrated because of it. We find ourselves impatient, normally with our loved ones, and we're more likely to snap and react unnecessarily. We get those mood swings, and for some people, you just suddenly feel the urge to cry. And it's not necessarily a hormonal thing. It can be just because of all this stress that's burdening you physically and mentally. We've already mentioned about sleep patterns, but insomnia can be a real problem with stress. When we're talking maybe post-trauma as well, we might have added things like nightmares. Sometimes our brain will create nightmares that have never existed, and you still wake up feeling fear and anxiety over some really ridiculous dream that you're having that's nothing to do with any kind of post-trauma. And of course, this can lead on to things like suicidal thoughts. Now, suicidal thoughts are quite natural. We've probably all at some point in our life when we're going through a tough time thought about it for a brief second. And then it goes out of our brain because we know it's just something that's, it's not on the list of things to do. But it's something that we often think of that we should never have suicidal thoughts, but it's something that's quite natural. And we shouldn't be scared of it. Of course, what we don't want to do is have someone in such a bad state that they react upon it and start carrying out that thought. But that's when hopefully intervention from recognizing signs and symptoms of stress, anxiety, and PTSD, you can help people and encourage them to get help for themselves as well. Mention things about trouble concentrating, learning. Your learning capability reduces when you're stressed, for sure, because of that inability to focus and concentrate. Forgetfulness, nervousness, lack of confidence. You start getting unconfident about your abilities because you're always anxious and nervous and everything else, and it has a knock-on effect to your confidence. And quite often with everything going on, especially if you start getting external stresses, you start feeling overwhelmed because not only are you stressed in your own life, but you're getting external stresses compounding it. So we need to make sure that we can deal with ourselves first before we start dealing with external problems. General irritability, other things that we can get. And little things that normally wouldn't annoy us suddenly become big things and you get angry about them. I'm sure we've all had that when we look back on situations and how we reacted and thought, that was pathetic. It was something so trivial. I don't understand why I reacted like that. And quite often you end up making apologies. Now, some forms of coping are negative. Some people turn to alcohol, drugs, gambling, and other impulsive things, smoking too much. And also, one of the things that can also be tied in with this is over-exercising. Exercise is a great way of reducing stress, but if you're running away from it and just hiding in the gym, doing hours and hours of exercise to not address the situation, then nothing's going to change when you leave the gym. You're just going to feel stressed again. But you get a short-term fix, a bit like when I was doing massage and helping people, and they'd walk out feeling great. 2 or 3 days later, it's all come back again. So be careful that you don't use over-exercise to cope with stress. Something that we can also find physically is that we get a decrease of energy. And that can be from the fatigue and the tiredness of not being able to sleep, but also that constant vigilance and alertness where we're burning off energy constantly. All that adrenaline and cortisol is running through your body. The energy has got to come from somewhere. It comes from your body. And that can lead on to food cravings. Now, normally in a fight, flight, freeze response, you'd become into a stressful situation. So a bear runs out of the woods and starts attacking you, and you've got to fight it off or run away. And you run away, you fight it, run away, you save yourself, and then you've burnt off hundreds of calories of energy, and your body will trigger a craving for sugary and fatty food so that you replace the energy that you've burnt off. But when you're in a constant state of stress and anxiety and that hypervigilance and all that other stuff, then your body's triggering this response for sugary and fatty food cravings, and it believes you've burnt off loads of energy when in fact you haven't. So that's when chocolate is an ideal stress buster. Not only does it give you the sugary and fatty food, but it also releases endorphins that make you feel good. But it's obviously long term eating that kind of amount of chocolate will not be healthy. So you do really need to be aware of what you're eating when you're getting this sugary and fatty food craving, and why you're getting it. If you can be aware of why you're getting these sugar and fatty food cravings, then hopefully you can address the situation and reduce the cravings by reducing your stress. Excuse me a minute. It's not COVID. So small increases of cortisol are helpful, but long-term, over a long period of time, elevated levels of cortisol are really detrimental. Now, I've already mentioned a few things that we can do to help ourselves. Meditation, exercise, yoga, all these kind of things. A lot of these things I used to think were girly, being a regiment gunner. But it's something I've realized as I got older is so beneficial, both physically and mentally. Encouraging your sleep pattern or getting into a good sleep routine. Now, we do it with our kids when they're young. We get them in a sleep routine. You know, when they're really small, under the age of 1, we have a bath routine, getting them into their pajamas, having their bottle of milk, and then they go to sleep. And that routine is a great way of triggering the sleep hormones that we need, the melatonin, all that good stuff. So we do need that routine of sleep. Now, we all know about blue light and how it can keep the brain awake at night. So watching TV right up to the point where you go to sleep can be detrimental. Being on your phone, being on your laptop, being on your tablet, whatever it is giving a blue light into your brain that tells your brain to stay awake. It's reducing the hormones that trigger for sleep. And of course, it can elevate your cortisol because you're getting those endorphins, those kicks from watching an exciting film, watching an exciting series, that nice little hormone release you get when you realize that your post has got 100 likes or whatever it is. And it's always triggering that thing for you to stay awake. So we need to reduce that. We need to make sure that we can maybe just put on your blue light filter on your phone. I have mine triggered to start at 7 o'clock in the evening till 7 o'clock in the morning. So throughout that time, if I'm using my phone, my brain isn't getting bombarded by blue light. And I try and not watch TV right up until the point where I go to sleep. Try and turn it off a little bit early. It might be that I'll catch up on social media on my phone for half an hour, but if I've got my blue light filter on, at least my brain isn't getting bombarded. Excellent. That's better. So we need to focus on our sleep pattern and what we can do about it. Other things that we can do, of course, is seek help. Now, realizing you've got a problem is usually the hardest part of seeking help. But once you've maybe acknowledged you've got a problem, or even if someone like you love, one of your partner, someone of your family members is telling you, I think you're too stressed, I think you need to get help. Maybe that's the point where you need to accept that, okay, I'll seek some professional advice, get assessed, see if I am stressed, see if I feel better when I'm not stressed. And seeking that help, sometimes you just need to accept other people's opinion. But hopefully what will happen is they will encourage you to realize that you do have a problem that you need to address. And it doesn't have to be a major problem, but if you're not sleeping properly and you're not necessarily performing at 100%, then there are simple things you can do. Getting regular exercise is a great way. I mean, I used to love running. I used to find to go for a run, my head would be clear. But after my knee surgery, I had to stop running. So I found other things like cycling and kayaking, which I can still do, still clear my head. And I walk my dogs every day. And even though that might only be for 20 minutes or so, it's still a chance for me to put my phone away, enjoy nature, and clear my head so that I'm reducing my stress levels. which is not a bad thing at all. Now, there's quite a long list. I'm just looking for my list of other things that we can do to help ourselves. Yeah, and I think I've lost it, but I think I've covered most of them already. But anyway, I think it's just a matter of being able to apply a little bit of common sense and finding what's good for you, whether it be listening to some nice chill out music, maybe some brainwave music, some audio stuff that you can listen to on YouTube or online for relaxation or whatever it is. Just getting out in nature and going for a walk in the woods and the countryside and enjoying. I mean, a lot of people might put that under mindfulness, appreciating what's around you. There's been some studies on gratitude, just being thankful for certain things. And if you you don't have to do it every day, but if you just go through a list once or twice a week of things that you're really truly thankful for, not just listing off, well, I'm thankful for my wife, but listing off reasons why I'm thankful for my wife. And it can really calm the brain and reduce your stress and anxiety. And it might sound a bit namby-pamby for a lot of people, but it's something I've realized as I've got older, that a lot of this stuff is stuff that we probably used to do 50 years ago as families and everything else. But as time's progressed and technology's taken over, we've drifted away from a lot of these things that we used to do, which naturally reduce stress. I mean, I remember as a child going for a walk on a Sunday afternoon after Sunday lunch. So we had that nice social experience as a family, having lunch together, and then we'd go for a walk through the countryside for no reason but to enjoy the countryside and enjoy each other's company. But that's something that even me as my family, with my children, we've stopped doing. We don't do that anymore because everybody wants to be on their social media, on their tablets, on their phones, and they don't want to go for a walk in the countryside. But when you start missing that kind of thing and realizing that's something you can do to help yourself, and it's free, a lot of it, socializing with family and friends, a bit difficult now, but you can still do it via things like Zoom and other social videos, and it's still having that physical and mental interaction, even though it might be online. And it's not as good as a hug directly, but just telling people you appreciate them on the video is a great way of encouraging people and helping people to feel calm and relaxed and appreciated. It's something that we don't do as human beings enough, is telling people how much we appreciate them. So using all these different strategies to help yourself is a great way of reducing stress. And you've got to find what's right for you. I find that listening to the brainwave music and doing a little bit of self-hypnosis works great for me. And I love going out for a bike ride, and kayaking is so relaxing. I absolutely love it. I don't do white water stuff. It's just a sit on top kayak, and I just go on the river or lake and just enjoy myself and appreciate nature and the company of one of my mates I go with. And it's a great way of just releasing any stress I've had and relaxing and bring myself down to a nice level. When I come home, I'm always in a happy mood, and that's a great way to be. Now we're going to talk a little bit about hypnotherapy and how it can help, and why the brain does what it does. Now, we have two sides of our brain. The left-hand hemisphere is the side that's logical, does the calculations. It's the side we verbally communicate with, and it's how we might plan and what's the word I'm looking for? Just plan and work things out on a logical level. The right-hand side of our brain, however, is the emotional side, and it's our creative side. It's the side that's more focused with the subconscious. It's the side that analyzes your environment for reacting with a flight, flight, freeze response. So that right-hand side of the brain, it needs that emotion to react quickly and instantly if something is harmful to you. And so we can't neglect that emotional side of our brain. Now, if a bear jumps out behind a tree and starts running towards you, that emotion, fear, is kicking in. It's releasing all sorts of hormones into your brain and into your body for you to react faster, react quicker, be stronger, and just survive. That survival's kicking in. And that's triggered by something called the amygdala, which is in the middle of the brain. It's about the size of an almond. And it's going to trigger all those hormones for you to react faster, react quicker, react stronger. So you've got a better chance of survival. So we do need that that flight, flight, freeze response to be there. But what we don't need, of course, is something like anxiety triggering it constantly. Now, although this is not an amygdala, it's just a representation of one. Your amygdala doesn't expand like this. It stays absolutely still. But if you imagine your amygdala is constantly asking, am I safe? Is it going to hurt me? Do I need to run away? Do I need to shout at it? It's constantly on the go, making sure that you are safe. Now, we're going to talk about fear of spiders because a lot of people understand a fear of spiders, even if you don't have one. But you can imagine somebody sat in the living room, spider runs across the floor, and they go, ah, spider! And all of a sudden they're in flight, flight, freeze response. Their body's getting bombarded with hormones. And they run out of the room and they won't go back in the room until the spider's dead. Now, while the spider's hiding and they can't find it, of course, they're not going to shut down. But as soon as the spider's been killed or been thrown out the window, they can relax and they go back to, am I safe? Do I need to run away? And it, you know, being in that nice calm state is a much better way to be than being in the phase. Okay. Now, when we get a constant anxiety, a constant fear, so you're always being pumped with these bad hormones. Now, this can be part of PTSD. A lot of things like anxiety, hypervigilance, fear is all on the list of things like PTSD. It doesn't have to be PTSD. Okay, any kind of post-traumatic stress can cause it, and it could be a fear that you've learned from childhood, like a fear of spiders quite often is learned from a parent. But if you're constantly in fear and you've got that fear blocking you to be able to shut down, it's never going to shut down. And it could be any kind of fear or anxiety. It doesn't have to be of spiders. But that negative thought, that negative feeling that you're feeling is not allowing you to calm down, not allowing your amygdala to shut off completely. So you're being pumped with all these negative hormones. And we need to address it. Now, one of the things we do with hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and although I'm trained in CBT and that's cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm also trained in NLP, neuro linguistic programming. Hypnotherapy is my go-to thing. It's the one I find most effective. And we focus on the negative thought, feeling, or emotion, and we slightly expand the way that feeling is. So, you know, rather than being on a 5 out of 10 all the time, we might expand it up to a 7 or 8 out of 10 so you can really feel it. And at that point, using hypnosis, maybe using kinetic shift, a few techniques that I've got, we literally pull that emotion out. That allows your amygdala to shut down. Now, we need to have an emotional link to everything in our life, every experience, the door, the roller coaster, the spider, your wife, your partner, your husband, whatever it is. You need to have an emotional link to everything because that tells your brain how to respond. Now, when we remove an emotion and it's gone, your brain still needs an emotional link to it, a neural pathway. So we have to immediately create a neural pathway for your brain to accept. So what we'll do with that, we will create a neural pathway, say the fear of spiders, we take away the fear, you can still think about a spider and you'll feel very blank at that stage because there is no fear. But if we leave it to its own devices, the brain will reconnect to that neural pathway to fear, maybe even worse than it was before. So we have to create a neural pathway for your brain, and we'll ask it to think about something happy and nice in your life that made you feel really confident, really strong, really powerful, really happy, full of love, full of joy. And we'll give it a neural pathway to the spider for that. So whenever you think about the spider, you'll have this new neural pathway that sort of cancels out the fear that you used to have. So you feel pretty much nothing when you think about a spider. You can still be cautious, of course. You analytical side of your brain understands that spiders are dangerous in various parts of the world. So if you suddenly go to South Africa or Australia, you know that these spiders can be dangerous, but you won't be captured by that fear, that panic that makes you run away and maybe act irrationally and unsafely. Fear of snakes, you know, you start running in the wrong direction with a snake and it might chase you and bite you anyway. So it might be that you need to, rather than panic, you need to step away slowly so you don't get a negative reaction from the snake. And that can be the same with lots of dangerous animals in the world. But rather than fear and panic, if you can be calm and confident in your situation, then you can act accordingly, and you've got a much better chance of survival if you're calm and rational and dealing with the situation rather than going into panic mode. And that's basically what we do with hypnotherapy. With negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions, we remove them and give you a new neural pathway to be calm, rational, and be happier in situations that would normally leave you stressed, anxious, in fear, in flight, flight, freeze mode. And it might sound simple, and in some degrees it is, but it does take a little bit of work on both parties, me and clients, and they have to be pretty much fully immersive in what I'm doing. But when it comes to hypnosis and hypnotherapy, it lends itself to that anyway. And I'm quite authoritarian when I approach hypnotherapy. So quite often you don't get a choice. As long as you're there and you want to be helped, I'll help you. And it's as simple as that. Smoking cessation. A lot of people ask me about that, and hypnotherapy. I've got a very good track record on smoking cessation, and I've helped quite a few people in RAF Honington with it, which is great. And quite often I only need one session. And it's been making sure people are at that point of threshold where they really do want to give up. Because if you're still enjoying it, chances are you'll find excuses not to give up. But when you get to that point where you just don't want to smoke anymore, you've had enough, and being an ex-smoker, I've been to that point. Then you know, with a little bit of help, you can literally just stop without any side effects. No weight gain, no irritability, no messing about your sleep pattern. It's just getting your brain to realize what it's capable of doing and achieving it, which is great. Other things that hypnosis can help with, eating disorders. We already mentioned anxiety, stress, PTS. I like to call it post-traumatic stress because anyone can get it. As soon as you add the D on it, you start thinking you're dysfunctional, you're a disorder. When in fact, PTSD is a normal reaction to abnormal events in your life, and it doesn't have to be combat. Quite often it can be things that lead up to that point where you snap, the proverbial, the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know, you could have had a messed up childhood. You could have had all sorts of things going on in your life. You could have been through divorce. You could have been through funerals, loss of loved ones. You could have been through combat, but you're fine. But years down the line, you know, one of your children drops their plate of dinner on the floor and it smashes, and all of a sudden you snap. And it starts a cycle of all the symptoms that come with PTS. But it's normal. That's the thing you need to understand. It's a normal reaction to an accumulation of events. And when the straw breaks the camel's back, what you need to do with the camel is start taking the straws off. Now, each straw can represent an event in your life that's burdened you. And if you can start reducing one by one, it doesn't have to be a whole bundle of straws. It can be just one straw at a time. And you get back to a stage where the camel can get up and the camel can walk and the camel can function normally, even though it might still be carrying quite a lot of burden. But you can function normally. So it's not necessarily about releasing all the trauma and releasing everything all at once. It's a matter of getting you to a state where you can just function normally. As long as you can function normally, life's great. Might need more work long term. I'm not saying it's going to be an overnight fix. It might be several sessions to slowly chip away at reducing that burden, reducing those straws so that you can function normally. I've heard of a nice analogy where as you go through life, you pick up burdens that have, you know, negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions. You put them in a jam jar and you put them in your rucksack, your backpack, your Bergen, whatever you want to call it. And the more you put in, you know, you can carry on walking, you carry on running. You're not got too much in there as you go through life. But the more you put in, the slower you're going to run, the slower you're going to walk, the more slumped over you're going to feel. And you can see that with people who are down and feeling maybe depressed. They're hunched over, they're not looking happy, they're not stood up feeling confident. And the more you put into that Bergen, your rucksack, the heavier that burden is going to feel in your life. And all those negative things that can start impacting you can just accumulate. But by taking those jars out one at a time, you can then start to stand up straight. You can start to walk again. You can start to run again. You can start to function normally again. And you don't have to remove it all. You just need to remove it down to a level that's where you're happy and functional. And if you start accumulating more, then you might have to remove some again. But that's fine. You know, you just got to be aware of how you feel in life and how it's affecting you and when you need to go for help, which can be part of the biggest problem about getting help. It's just realizing you need it in the first place. Now, I've had help. I didn't have combat PTSD. I didn't have any post-trauma from combat, but I had post-trauma from childhood. And it was only when I was on my hypnotherapy diploma that it came out. Didn't realize it was there, but it was something I was carrying around. It's probably something that was just a little bit of stress in the background, in my brain, in my life. And it came out during when we were practicing hypnotherapy on each other. And yeah, it didn't even know it was there. And that's something about hypnotherapy, is that it can uncover things. It can open a can of worms, so to speak. But the great thing I find about hypnotherapy compared to CBT is that you don't need to talk about it. It can be completely content free. So if you've had post-trauma, if you've had things that you don't really want to talk about, maybe you're a bit embarrassed, maybe it's just too uncomfortable to talk about. And combat PTSD is a classic example. The more you talk about it, you're almost enforcing the problem. You're making it bigger, making it more powerful, making it more intense. And it's not necessarily helping. And there was an MOD document reinforcing exactly what I've just said, how talking therapies can compound the problem. And they were looking for other forms of therapies. Now, the one I found was hypnotherapy. It can be completely content-free. We work on the emotion, we focus on the emotion, we take the negative emotions away, and we put in good emotions back so that you can be calm, relaxed, and happy with life. And you can remember those things like the combat, the post-trauma, the event, but you don't have the negative feelings with it when you think about it. And if you haven't got all those negative feelings, then you can look back on it almost like it was you're watching a movie. There's no music playing, there's no dialogue, and so you're not feeling all the emotions that come with it. So you can just look on it quite analytically rather than emotionally, which is a much better place to be, because there are things that we don't want to forget, because the experiences we've had in life are what makes us who we are today. So, we need those experiences. We need to remember them. And quite often if we've lost relatives, we've lost friends, we've lost comrades in war, we don't want to forget them. We don't want to forget how they died. We want to remember it. But what we can do is reduce or even take away the negative feeling that makes you down, that makes you angry, that makes you frustrated, that gives you the anxiety, that gives you the stress. We can reduce it down or remove it completely so that you can think about it with fond memory rather than all the negative stuff and crap that comes with it. We don't need it. We don't need to carry that around with us. But we still need to remember. So that's quite a lot of information I've thrown in there. I hope it's not been too overwhelming. I hope you found it interesting. And pretty much coming to the end of my time. If anyone wants to jump on and ask a question, please do. We've got about 5 minutes. You'll be able to find me by just looking up Matt Long, Mind and Body, Boris and Edmonds. I've got a website that's got loads of information on it as well. And I'm always up for a chat, always up for a video call, always up for helping people. And quite often, if I've got people who come to me in a really bad state and who just can't afford my prices, I do stuff for free as well, because I would never walk away from someone who's in dire need. And although obviously I can't mention any names, I have done that with a few people from RAF Honington. And of course, I always encourage them to go through the correct channels to get the help they need. But it's recognizing the signs, it's recognizing not only in yourself, but in others, so that you can encourage people to get help. Encourage yourself to get help. So it doesn't look like anyone's going to jump online to ask any questions, which is fine. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I've actually got a question.
Oh, go for it.
So the last thing you were talking about was hypnotherapy and CBT.
Mm-hmm.
I've just finished a mental health first aiders course, and I just kind of wanted to know a little bit more about when either one of those treatments would be suitable, or if it's down to the GP or what it is specifically that you're trying to deal with, whether one would be more suitable than the other.
Okay, now not every therapy works for everybody. Now, CBT can be great for helping people condition into certain environments. And it does seem to be that they encourage you to just think about that situation, put yourself in those situations, that you basically get conditioned to it. And that's it in a nutshell. It's a talking therapy. You've got to talk about the situation. You've got to talk about your condition. You've got to talk about all those kind of things, which can be detrimental to certain individuals. Some people it will help. I know from experience as an instructor in the military, when I first got trained to be an instructor, my first presentation, I was nervous as hell. And a lot of people are in those kind of, because it's a foreign environment being an instructor for a lot of people. But the more you do it, the more confident you get with it, the more you can, reduce the preparation time that you need, start cuffing it, and you can go into a classroom, be confident, and just start spilling off everything you need to teach. But when you first start it, you spend hours on preparation, you practice it, you rehearse it, and that's what you need to do. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And it's the same with a lot of situational, I'd just like to say situational feelings, where you might feel unconfident in a crowd or unconfident in certain situations, and talking about it can help you condition yourself towards it. When we're talking about things like post-trauma, I've helped a lot of civilians with post-trauma as well, the nightmares and everything else. Asking someone to talk about something like sexual abuse, they don't want to do it. And if I can use hypnotherapy to remove the negative emotion without them having to mention a word about it, and then, their nightmares stop overnight. Their anxiety is reduced. Their hypervigilance is reduced. I wouldn't say it's all gone straight away, and the nightmares weren't necessarily stopped overnight, as I just said, but I found with a lot of them, the nightmares, the intensity of the nightmares were reduced overnight. And when they did have nightmares, they weren't waking up in hot sweats, cold sweats, fear. They were waking up recognizing they had a nightmare rather than feeling like they were in the situation. And that's a big step forward. And over time, the nightmares completely went with all the cases that I've worked with. So different therapies for different people. Would you like to talk about PTSD, combat stress, combat situations you've been in where you've lost mates and seen horrific shit? Excuse my French. Probably not. But if you can focus on the emotion and remove the negative emotion, then you can help yourself feel better. And getting help for that is, probably the best way to do it. Having someone guide you through it rather than trying to do it yourself. Like I say, not every therapy works for every person, and being trained in all three allows me to combine them, allows me to merge them, and give that individual person the best possible treatment, the best possible help. Treatment might be a bit of a strong word, but it's just helping people to get to a state where they can function normally, get in a better sleep pattern, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Excellent. No worries. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking. These are kind of talks that I do at pain clinics, self-help groups, all sorts of stuff where I talk about stress and how it affects you mentally and physically, because we naturally, especially with social media and electronics and the way we live our lives nowadays, we never give ourselves a chance to switch off. And sometimes we just need to unplug, appreciate nature, appreciate things around us. So yeah, it's all out there. We've just got to make the decision to take hold of it, take control of it, and do it. So, well, I hope you've all enjoyed it. I'm going to sign off now. Please do get in touch. Look up Matt Long, Mind and Body, Bury St Edmunds. You'll find me. And if you want to phone for a chat first, if you want to book, if you want to do anything, just get in touch and we'll take it from there. All
and
right.
On behalf of everyone here, thank you, Matt, for running the session. It was really informative, and I hope everyone who's arrived today has taken something positive away. And it's great that there's lots of services out there, such as yourself, and obviously on station as well. Thank you again.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Much appreciated. Thank you.
No worries. My pleasure. Okay, you all take care, and hopefully we'll catch up again next year. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.